Hello, Mike. Oh, hi, Carol, I replied, turning around and involuntarily taking in the pretty woman in front of me, especially her slender body. How's little Tim? Oh, he's fine this morning, the young mother told me with a smile. He has already had a cold. How's Mary? Still lovely, I replied, smiling as I looked at my little daughter. Though I may be biased. Oh, I don't think so, Carol added, sitting down next to me, her jeans tighter as she did so. But she's so lucky to have a father like you after what her mother did. It all started almost 2 years ago. That is, my problems began because until then my wife Janet and I were enjoying what seemed like a completely normal, happy family life. That is, if, of course, we accept that a happy marriage is normal. For some time, this was in question for me. We met a few years ago. Janet was a friend of Martha's who went to school with my sister Julie. We met at a party in Manchester, where we both lived, and hit it off straight away. I think we were both pretty cute in our own ways and seemed well suited to each other from the start. Janet was seemingly slim, but also curvy, which may seem like a contradiction, but she pulled it off incredibly well. Her long, shiny black hair didn't spoil her appearance either, nor did her sparkling deep blue eyes. Admittedly, I probably had to work a little harder to get her to agree to be our permanent couple than she did in the beginning, but once it all started, it was all just wonderful. One thing led to another, and it just seemed like all our friends were getting married. I think we've all been that age, late 20s, early 30s, and we're looking for somewhere to settle. I finally asked Janet to marry me, and she agreed without hesitation, just as I knew she would. We were practically living together already, so it was simply a matter of a visit to the local registry office with close family and a group of friends, followed by a big party at our local pub. We didn't even have our wedding night because we were both very drunk, but Janet was too drunk to care much about it. But life went on and marriage didn't seem to have much of an impact on our daily lives, which consisted of work, parties, dining out, and sex, but not necessarily in that order. My one ongoing problem was that living there in Manchester as an Arsenal fan wasn't always easy. If it wasn't some United fan, it was someone who was a City fan. Gosh, it's hard to believe, but there were people there who went to watch Stockport County games every week. Yes, I know, maybe Bolton Wanderers or even Wigan, but, well, damn it, it didn't help that Janet and her whole family supported Manchester United, and her father simply shook his head when we discussed which club our future children would support. So life went on quite happily, and as the years passed, Janet and I became closer and closer. I remember well that it was the beginning of the football season when I noticed that something might not be as it should be. I was fine, but Janet seemed a little distant and sometimes irritable with me. I couldn't understand exactly why, so I chalked it up to the change in hormones during Women's Days. Well, that's what we guys do, isn't it? When everything you say is wrong and the sex stops for days. But her moods seemed longer than they should have been, and if I hadn't been so busy at work, maybe I would have noticed some warning signs. As it turns out, I had decided that I would have a serious talk with her on Sunday, but fate intervened and I never got the chance. We went to a party at a local club on Saturday when my life changed forever. It was an engagement party for someone Janet worked with, but I'm ashamed to say I can't remember who it was, just that Janet and I were invited. It was full of people. I had to queue for drinks, and they weren't even free. What a damn engagement party. No wonder they held it at a club and not at their home, you impudent people. I returned to our table, carefully carrying a couple of beers for me and Tota, Martha's husband, and gin and tonics for our wives. Where are the girls? I asked Tota without seeing them. Dancing with some old friends, he answered calmly. He wasn't worried, so why should I? We had difficulty speaking due to the noise around us, inevitably discussing the results of the big games that had taken place that day. Arsenal and United won, so there was nothing to argue about, and I hardly noticed how time passed. Hey guys, Martha greeted us as she returned to the table. Is this my drink? Yes, I replied, interrupting my diatribe about the problems with the 4-4-2 formation. Where is Janet? Oh, she's still dancing out there somewhere, Martha replied and quickly changed the subject. Too fast. Who is she dancing with? I demanded, my attention being captured. She's been dancing for quite a long time. Just with an old friend, Mike, Martha snapped. Nothing to worry about. Who cares? I asked. Why should I worry? No reason, Mike. None at all. It's just an old friend that Janet hasn't seen for a long time. Shouldn't this have sounded alarm bells? It's hard to say, but I sat back in my chair and took a sip of my beer, trying to pretend I didn't care even though I was already boiling inside. Another 10 minutes, and at least 2 music changes passed, and my irritation grew. Martha whispered something to Todd twice, and both of them studiously avoided my gaze, almost pretending that I was not there. Come on, you two, I finally asked in desperation. What the hell is going on here? Who is this friend of hers? Maybe you should go find her, Mike, Todd suggested, ignoring the dirty looks Martha was giving him. No, she shouted, jumping up and thrusting my half-empty pint into my hands. No need, Mike. I'll go and find her for you myself. Brother, there's something going on here, and I asked no. I demanded that Todd explain what the hell the girls were up to. Oh, just some football player they used to know, he replied. It doesn't sound too confident. I think he used to play for United in the junior team, but he didn't make it to the level he needed, and now he's playing somewhere up north in one of the lower divisions. Did you know him? I asked. My throat was dry, and I stood up, deciding to see for myself what was happening. It seems your Janet knew him better than Martha, Mike, Todd admitted cautiously, holding my hand. Don't do anything stupid, Mike. I'm sure Janet doesn't do anything she shouldn't. Well, I'll see for myself, Todd, I growled, swatting his hand away, wondering if this had something to do with Janet's bad mood lately. But I didn't go far. Not far. Here she is, Mike, Martha announced, out of breath, almost dragging Janet along with her. Everything is fine. Janet and I looked at each other in silence for a few moments. It seemed that even the noise around us had died down. She just stood there, making no attempt to sit up and offering no apology or explanation. Who is he? I finally asked. Where did this guy come from? What do you care about that? Janet snapped. What right do you have to dictate who I spend time with? I'm your damn husband, I reminded her, raising my voice. And you should remember that. Husband, she spat. Husband? It was you who should have remembered that I am your wife. What are you talking about, Janet? What's gotten into you? I was screaming by that time and didn't understand what she was talking about, and people around me began to notice the noise. You didn't think about your wife when you were with Jennifer Meadows, did you? She shouted at me. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words disappeared. How did she know about Jennifer and me? See, Janet continued accusingly. You don't even deny it, you bastard. Janet, honey, I began to answer. Jennifer and I were. That was as far as I got before my wife interrupted me. You slept with her, right? Janet accused me. You slept with her. Yes, honey, I answered almost automatically, surprised by the ferocity of her attacks. But, no buts, you cheating bastard, Janet interrupted. I know what you did to that cow, and I'm not going to stand for it. But honey, it's not what you think. Oh shit, oh my God, of all the stupid damn things, why did I say that? Well, you can go to hell, you bastard, Janet screamed so that everyone around could hear. We're done, and you can sleep with that damn Jennifer Meadows all you want. Listen, Janet, I began, moving forward to hug Janet. Jennifer and I were. My speech was suddenly interrupted by Janet, who grabbed a glass of beer from the table and threw it at me. I was too close to try to avoid it. Fuck you, my wife screamed and walked away, followed by Martha, screaming for her to stop. Jesus, Mike, Todd said, standing up and starting to dry me off. Jennifer Meadows and you. She's damn beautiful, man, but have you seen her husband? I know her damn husband, Bright, I said, drying myself. and he already knows about his wife and me. Total surprise appeared, but I did not have time to explain to him more, as a fight broke out on the other side of the room. The women were screaming and screaming. Tables and chairs flew apart, and it was a real mess. In other circumstances, I might be worried or even amused, but in the state I was in, I just stood and watched. "Jesus, Mike," Todd interjected. "It's your Janet they're fighting with some blonde. This is Jennifer Meadows." "Damn right, Mike," muttered Bright. "Looks like the fight is over." "Oh shit, what a terrible mess. How the hell did a couple of nights with Jennifer lead to this? What's the matter, Mike?" Even though I held my head in my hands, I recognized the harsh words of another very upset woman yelling at me. All I wanted at that moment was to leave, but life, at least my life, has never been so easy. "Hi, Jennifer, how are you?" I couldn't think of anything else to say in my state. "Like me?" Beautiful Jennifer Meadows shouted back, her huge husband Fred standing behind her, glaring at me. "What did you say to that stupid cow Janet?" "Nothing," I stated, keeping Fred in my sight. I tried to explain, but... "She claimed we were having an affair, Mike," Jennifer interrupted. "She said you confessed to her." I swallowed. Fred, a big guy, looked sickly, and that wasn't good. "What's the matter, Mike?" Jennifer demanded. She didn't give me a chance to explain. "Jennifer," I managed to interject when she gave me the chance to speak. "She asked me if we slept together, and I somehow confessed before I had time to think about it." "But that was a long time ago, Mike," Jennifer exploded. "We dated before I met Fred, and you got involved with Janet." "I know," I muttered, but she didn't give me a chance to explain it. I looked at Fred, and he was smiling at me. Well, he kind of smiled. I thanked my lucky stars that he already knew Jennifer, and I had been together for months before he came on the scene. He was a damn big guy, that Fred. "What a stupid cow Janet is," Jennifer remarked, and then screamed. "What's happened?" I asked, looking around, expecting to see my angry wife advancing on us with a broom or something. "Your face, Mike," she screamed, perhaps finally noticing that I was still covered in beer. "Janet threw a beer at me, Jennifer," I explained, trying to smile as if it didn't matter. "But are you hurt?" "Wounded. Oh my God." Everyone started fussing around me. The glass must have broken when it hit me. Gordon Bennett, what a stunning mess. 20 minutes later, I was in the emergency room of the local hospital, making an appointment with some dragon in a nurse's uniform. "Fought?" she accused me with an expression of disgust. Not surprising, considering how I looked surrounded by all that garbage in the emergency room. Well, it was Saturday night, after all. "No," I replied. "The wife did it." "You probably deserve it," she commented sharply and moved on to the next unfortunate person. So much for the bloody National Health Service. But seriously, they patched me up, and a few stitches, and a couple of hours later, Fred, oddly enough, gave me a ride home in his car. Home, that is, to a cold, empty place. Janet is following us. God, what a fucking mess it was. I tried to call her on her mobile phone, but to no avail. I only received an answering machine message. "Sorry, Janet Morris is unavailable." And so on and so forth. This didn't make me feel any better, and you can imagine how angry I was. I went to bed, but guess how long I slept that night? What's left of the night, to be precise. Morning sun shower, tea, and breakfast. Well, not too much breakfast, as I could barely hold it down. Then I heard my cell phone vibrate and tiredly walked over to where I had left it the night before, not looking forward to the conversation ahead. It was actually a text message, and yes, you can guess who it was from. "You're a cheater, fuck you." Well, that was nice, wasn't it? "Where are you?" I wrote in response. Stu, the message came back, and I felt the remnants of my breakfast go back up. I desperately tried to call to talk to her, to try to prevent Janet from making a terrible mistake. But again, I only received an answering machine message, even though I knew she must have the phone. Then it dawned on me that it was 9:30 in the morning and my loving wife had been out all night. I realized with horror that it was probably too late to prevent what I was afraid of, and images of my Janet, even at that very moment, with some idiot football player, a second-rate one at that, floated before my eyes. Oh no. Despite myself, I couldn't hold on to the leftovers from my breakfast, and this time I just let it happen. Damn dirt all over the carpet that took me hours later to clean. I didn't know what to do. I tried calling Martha's cell phone, but no one answered, and when I tried their home number, I breathed a sigh of relief when Fred answered. "What's up, Mike?" he asked. "Terrible," I replied and told him about the text messages. Martha went to talk to her, Mike, Fred continued. She had spoken to her on the phone earlier, and they had a huge argument. "Where is she, Fred?" I asked quietly. "Where did Janet spend the night?" "I shouldn't tell you, Mike," he answered hesitantly. "I promised Martha." "That practically tells me where she spent the night, Fred, doesn't it?" I faked it. "Looks like it, Mike," he confirmed. "But that doesn't mean she slept with someone or anything like that." "Who is this guy, Fred?" I asked, dismissing his last comment as unlikely. "What's his name?" "I don't know him, Mike," Fred replied, perhaps thinking he was safe at that point. "His name is Nick Masters or something like that, and he was transferred in the off-season a few weeks ago. He's playing for Stockport this year." Stockport. I have nothing against Stockport, but damn. Either way, the name Nick was all I needed to know. I've never met this guy, and Janet has never mentioned him. But her mom. Oh, yes. Yes, she mentioned that name several times in our early days before she realized that her daughter was serious about me. Hell, she even called me Nick by mistake a couple of times, but then I just laughed. Suddenly, everything fell into place. He had apparently been in the area for several weeks, about as long as Janet had been distant with me. That's about how long we haven't had sex. I could hardly believe that my Janet would cheat on me, but everything pointed to it. What should I do? What could I do? The obvious, of course, is a damn cheater. I jumped up and ran up the stairs, bursting into our bedroom like a man possessed. Grabbing the first suitcase I could find from the closet, I opened the first of Janet's drawers and began stuffing it with handfuls of blouses and other items. I'll show her. In a rage, I threw the drawer aside and forcefully opened the next drawer, taking a handful of clothes from there. Underwear, sexy bras, and tiny panties. They are all sexy. I couldn't resist, to be honest. I stopped and looked at them, remembering how beautiful Janet looked in them. Remembering how she loved to tease me by walking around the house in nothing but a sexy bra and panties and high heels. Remembering how a few months ago she opened the door for me when I returned from work in the evening, wearing only these very tiny pieces of nothing that I now held in my hand. That's when the first tear blurred my vision, and although I tried to wipe it away for a few moments, it didn't seem to want to go away. They say it's only when you lose something that you realize how important it is, right? Well, at that defining moment, it hit me like a brick how much I loved Janet and how much I would miss her if she left, or if I kicked her out, which seemed to be the route I was going. She cheated on me, and I had to be realistic about it. But who gave her the idea that I was cheating on her? Who told her I was having an affair with Jennifer Meadows? The devil knows. Does it even matter? Well, for that matter. I sadly let the underwear in my hand fall back into the drawer, sank onto the bed, and let the tears flow as I began to realize the true depths of despair, my former happy existence in tatters. I was still sitting there for some time, perhaps hours, when the phone rang again. Yes, he called several times, and I chose to ignore him. "Hello," I answered without much enthusiasm. "Hello, Mike. It's me, honey," I heard from the other end of the line. "I tried to call you, dear." "I was out of the house, Janet," I lied, not wanting to admit that I had been sitting there crying for half a day. "I think I made a terrible mistake, Mike," Janet muttered into the phone. "Martha told me what happened next, and I even talked to Jennifer and apologized." "So what now?" I challenged her. "Where do you and I stand, Janet?" "Well, I hope. I mean, oh God, Mike, I guess you know about Nick. That he plays football for bloody Stockport, or that you spent the night in bed with him. There was a long pause on the line. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mike, she finally continued. I really love you, darling, and I hate myself for hurting you. I was a real bitch. Did you sleep with him? I accused her. I don't want to talk about this on the phone, honey. Janet swallowed, clearly close to tears. Can I come and see you? Not now, Janet, I replied, remembering the pile of vomit on the living room floor. Give me an hour or so. Okay, honey, she replied, and this time I heard sobs. I'll be there tonight around 8. Oh my God, what a terrible job. Have you ever cleaned vomit out of a carpet? No. Then this is not what I recommend, and I had to run to the toilet twice before I got it in a half-decent condition, and then I had to get myself in order. I wasn't looking forward to our meeting at all, and I still haven't decided how to behave. Yes, of course, I wanted my wife back, but I needed to know who put this crap into her head, and someone had to pay for it. But even then, it wasn't that easy, was it? If Janet really did make one mistake, and it was just a one-time transgression, then I thought I could forgive her. Yes, these things happen, and I wanted her back enough to turn my back on it, so to speak. But she's been weird with me for 2 weeks or more. Has she been seeing this Nick behind my back these past 2 weeks? Was she having sex with him all this time behind my back? I had no idea, and there was no point in speculating. I just prayed that by that evening everything would be okay between us again. 8 o'clock in the evening had passed, and I was on edge. The telephone rang. That damn phone again. Hi, Mike, this is Martha, she greeted me. Hi, Martha, I'm just waiting for Janet, I replied. Thank you, I understand. You explained everything to her. I'm afraid Janet won't come tonight, Mike, Martha snapped at me without preamble. I've been talking to her on the phone for the last hour, and she's in a terrible state. Why? I demanded, even though it was a stupid question. She's just so confused, Mike. She can't believe what she did to you, and she's not sure you'll accept it. She's very confused and very upset. Well, she probably deserved it, to be honest, I continued. But I don't want to lose her, Martha. I love her very much. I know, Mike, Martha consoled me. I'm sure you both will figure it out and work things out. Janet asked me to let you know that she will be coming to talk to you tomorrow after work. Her mom will bring her. This old witch, I thought, but not out loud, and simply thanked Martha for the information. I assume Janet will spend the night at her parents' place, I asked, crossing my fingers, hoping for reassurance. I think so, Mike. That was all the peace I got. It left me feeling empty inside, and I picked up the phone at least 4 times to call her parents, only to put it down each time, completely distraught. What if she refuses to talk to me? Even worse, what if she wasn't there? Oh shit, I told myself that everything would be fine the next day and finally made it to bed, having drunk 1.5 bottles of wine, which at least helped me fall into a restless sleep. Forget about the next day at work. Better just forget about it. I didn't get fired or anything, but the boss was clearly unhappy with me. Go home, Mike, he ordered me in the middle of the day. You're good for nothing here. I think he realized that I was having family problems, and I remember him going through a difficult period himself last year. Whatever the problem is, Mike, solve it. Don't do anything rash that you'll regret for the rest of your life. So I went home and immediately wished I had stayed at work, where I at least theoretically had something to occupy my mind. The call from Martha, when it came, was a welcome distraction, and she wished me luck. She told me not to jump head first into the pool and to give Janet time to explain everything. Well, it seemed like everyone wanted my marriage to last, and it seemed like Janet wanted it too. It seemed like everything would depend on me, so I decided to try to forgive and forget. Forget. Well, it wouldn't be that easy, but I really felt that forgiveness was possible. No, not easy, that's not the right word, but Janet was my life. Heck, we even discussed trying for a baby a few weeks ago, didn't we? Wasn't sure about this for a while, but, well, just a but. My heart skipped a beat when I heard a car pull up, and I couldn't help but look out the window and watch Janet and her damn mother get out of the car. They both looked nervously at the house, and I'm sure Janet said something sharply to the old witch. I hoped Janet wouldn't ring the doorbell or do anything stupid, but sure enough, a few moments later they came in to find me standing there waiting for them. "Hi, Mike," Janet said carefully. "Are you okay, honey?" When I didn't say anything, just shrugged and nodded my head in acceptance, Janet's face broke into a faint smile, and she rushed over to me and hugged me tightly. "Oh, I'm so damn sorry, Mike. I'm truly and truly sorry," she sobbed. "I was such a fool listening to what other people said." "It's okay, honey," I replied, hugging her and allowing the healing process to begin, although I knew it wouldn't be easy. "Could you leave us for a while?" I said to her mother, who was still standing there with a sullen face. "I think Janet and I need some alone time. I think I should stay and just." She began to argue, but Janet interrupted her. "Please, Mom, don't be stubborn. This isn't easy for Mike, and I'd rather you weren't here." Her mother made a displeased face and reluctantly left the room. I was somewhat puzzled why she still believed that I was to blame, since this was clearly her attitude towards me. Our conversation began, and at first it was what I expected. "I can't apologize to you, Mike, for how much I hurt you, honey," Janet began. "I should have talked to you about this before I did something so stupid in public." "Who fed you this false information then, Janet?" I asked, but she refused to tell me, although I noticed her glance at the door her mother had come out through before returning to me. "So what is it? Bitch. Why did she hate me so much?" I decided that this was not the end of the matter, but the moment of reconciliation did not seem appropriate. "I'll wait for my time. I will find out everything, and this treacherous bitch will pay." "Will you forgive me, dear?" Janet begged, looking at me with watery eyes. "I need to know that I need to forgive Janet," I replied. "You slept with him, didn't you?" "Yes, Mike," she whispered quietly, burying her face in my chest. "And I suspect that this was not the first night." "No, Mike," Janet sharply objected to me. "I swear it was the first time." "Well, at least for the first time since I was his girlfriend a few years ago." "But you still dated him, right?" I accused her. "Yes," she admitted humbly. "I met him several times for lunch and a couple of times after work." "And had sex with him, I guess," I frowned. "No, I told you, Mike," Janet pleaded. "I promise it wasn't. I let him kiss me and cuddle a little, that's all." "But why, Janet?" I asked, almost on the verge of tears. "I need to know to deal with this." "What's wrong with me, honey? You do not love me." "Of course I love you, Mike," she cried in despair. "But that's the whole problem, don't you understand?" "To understand that," I responded. "You love me, so why do you need another man?" Janet hesitated and then crushed all my hopes. "I love Nick too, Mike. Don't you understand? I never stopped loving him and had to go north with him when he asked me a few years ago. Only my mother stopped me then, and I never looked at another man seriously until I met you." "What? What the hell are you telling me?" I shouted at her, pushing her away. My brain could not understand what she was telling me. "I'm sorry, Mike, but you had to find out sooner or later, honey," she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you, darling, but I also love Nick and always have." "Nick? Well, Nick is Nick, and we were always meant to be together." "What are you telling me?" I squeezed out, not believing my ears, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm sorry, darling," Janet cried, now in a full flood of tears. "I'm not coming home, darling. I can't. I should try to be with Nick now that he's back. It had to happen like this." I stood there in a trance, unable to speak and possibly on the verge of a heart attack. I could not believe it. I was looking in my heart to forgive my wife, and all this time my dear Janet was planning to leave me for another man. At that moment, the door swung open and her mother rushed in. "Haven't you caused enough trouble?" she shouted at me. "I hope you're happy with yourself now you made my daughter cry." "Mom," Janet sobbed, "please don't interfere. None of this would have happened if he had not appeared," her mother continued. "You took her away from me and from Nick. "Mom, shut up for Christ's sake," Janet shouted at her. "Even better," I intervened, coming to my senses a little. "Get out of my house, you meddling old cow." "You can't talk to me like that," the old cow flushed, but I grabbed her hand and forcibly led her to the front door, where I slammed the door in her face. "Sorry about Mom," Janet said sadly. "Sorry about everything, Mike." "I think you better leave too, Janet," I said sternly to my so-called wife. "Nick will miss you." "But we need to work things out, Mike," Janet objected. "I can't just walk away and leave you like this." "You already left once, Janet," I pointed out angrily. "I don't need your damn pity." "But I want to help you, Mike," she sobbed. "I want you to understand." "I don't need your help, Janet," I spat in her face. "And I understand perfectly well that you cheated on me and are now leaving me for some other poor guy." "Please, Mike," she sobbed softly. "Please let me." "No, Janet," I shouted at her, driven to the limit. "Please, if you want to do something for me, then just leave." Janet burst into tears again, sobbing into her hands. "Will you ever be able to forgive me, Mike?" she finally asked between sobs. "Will you ever be able to forgive me for what I did to you?" "Yes, you're forgiven, bitch, if that's what you want," I lied to her through clenched teeth. "Now get out of my house and let me get on with my life, if I can." Janet took a step towards me, offering her face for perhaps one last kiss, but I stepped back and raised my hand to stop her. "I can forgive you, Janet," I cried in agony, "but not enough to let you touch me again." Janet sank even more, slowly turned around and left the house, her sobs still audible even after she had disappeared from my life forever. Or so I thought at the time. I don't remember anything about the next few days as I sank into a bottomless pit of depression. From a happy married man thinking about starting a family, in a few days I turned into an abandoned, unhappy person. It was too much, and I turned to alcohol as an escape. But of course, that's never the answer, is it? I don't want to remember too much about that terrible week, but with the help of a few friends, I managed to pull myself out. Even my boss was understanding, but probably because I was very good at my job, so it benefits him. Do you see what happened to me? No wonder I became a cynic. Our friends seemed to be divided into two parts. Although most of them had known Janet much longer than they had known me, many of them supported me. They never mentioned her name in my presence, except on occasion. Some terrible feeling inside me wanted to know more about Nick, but I couldn't bring myself to ask anyone about him. I even went to a Stockport match one night and saw the bastard come on as a second-half substitute and score to save the draw. I still didn't know much about him, but I had to admit that he was a good footballer. I wondered if Janet was in the crowd that night and scanned the stands for her. But there were no traces of her. Perhaps it was too far. I left the stadium that night feeling more miserable than I could describe. That bastard beat me, and all I could do was see images of a happy Janet throwing herself into his arms after his success on the field. I doubt she even thought about me, poor thing. I wasn't ready for dating or anything like that, and it would certainly take a long time to feel ready to start that part of my life again. I didn't think about divorce or anything else, and I didn't see the point in it. If she wants to marry him, then let her arrange everything, and he will pay for it. He probably earned enough as a professional footballer, even if it was just Stockport. Life went on. Then, 3 weeks after our breakup, around 9 in the evening, my miserable evening was interrupted by a knock on the door. Opening it, I was amazed to see Janet standing there. "What do you want?" I asked in an unfriendly tone. "Can I come in, please, Mike?" she asked. I hesitated but stood aside and followed her into the living room, my mind in turmoil as Janet was the last person I expected to see. Damn it, why did she have to look so damn gorgeous? "So what do you want?" I repeated sternly, noting how miserable Janet looked. Perhaps he abandoned her or something else. Maybe it was too naive to hope. Did I really want this? "Can I have a cup of tea, please, dear?" Janet asked quietly. "Are you sure you'll stay that long, Janet?" I answered sharply. "Nick won't miss you, and I'm no longer your dear, in case you forgot." "Please, Mike, don't be cruel to me," she begged, wringing her hands. Nick doesn't know I'm here, but we need to discuss something. I have nothing to talk to you about, Janet, I told her, my heart breaking. Please, Mike, don't be difficult. We really need to talk. Reluctantly, I went to the kitchen and made 2 mugs of tea. It seemed like old times, but of course it was not at all like that. I stood there, waiting for the kettle to boil, wondering what Janet wanted from me this time. Divorce, maybe. Was this the moment? So what do we need to talk about, Janet? I demanded, handing her a mug of tea. I can't imagine there's anything left to sort out. I'm pregnant, Mike, she blurted out and lowered her head into her hands. It was fast, I responded. You've only been sleeping with him for a few weeks. This is not Nick's baby, Mike. What? This is not Nick's baby, Mike. But, I don't understand. I've been pregnant for almost 3 months, Mike, Janet continued almost inaudibly. It couldn't be Nick's child, since he only returned a couple of months ago. It must be yours. You're the father of my baby, Mike. Oh my gosh, what have I done to deserve this? Let's be honest. You wouldn't want to be in my shoes at that moment, right? What would you do? The woman I hated but loved at the same time was pregnant with my child. Oh, don't doubt it. This was my child. Should I tell her to get lost, as I was inclined to do, or react differently, as I really wanted? I was confused. Well, for starters, we both just stood there, looking at each other. I was wondering what to say, and Janet was wondering what my reaction would be. Well, Janet finally asked. I don't know what to say, I answered. Are you happy? She asked carefully. I must be, I answered. We were planning to start a family, Mike, she continued carefully. Well, you know, before everything happened. But where does that leave us now, Janet? I asked the obvious question. It's all up to you, Mike, Janet squeezed out with difficulty. Will you bring me back or not? And Nick, your boyfriend. What about him? I demanded, feeling my nerves begin to rise at her impudence. How does he fit into all this? He doesn't like children, Mike. He made this clear, especially to strangers. Does he even know about the child? I asked, wondering if he had already thrown it away. Does anyone else know? No, Mike, she answered incredibly honestly. I thought I would tell you first. My feelings for Nick haven't changed since I left you, Mike, but I really missed you a lot. Not a single day went by that I didn't think about you. But he's still the first choice, right? Maybe, but you and the child change everything. I'll give it up if I have to. My mind was racing as we sat and just looked at each other again. I knew things couldn't be the same, but maybe it could at least be normal. And the child, this was the deciding factor. I simply could not throw my unborn child out into the street. Okay, Janet, I softened. You can come back if that's what you want, but not to my bedroom. For now, you sleep in the guest room, and we'll see how it goes. Oh, thank you, Mike, dear, Janet said, jumping up and rushing towards me. I knew you wouldn't let me down. You will see, everything will be fine. When she tried to kiss me, I turned my face away so she could kiss me on the cheek, which surprised her, but she ended up in my lap with her arms wrapped around my neck. I wanted to push her away, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It just felt so right to be there again. I'll move next week if that's okay for you, Mike, Janet said happily, but she was in for a surprise. You are moving now, at this moment, or never, I confidently told her. There's no way I'm going to sit at home for a week waiting for you while you're with him. But what about Nick? She asked evasively. I need to explain it to him, Mike. I can't just leave him. How you abandoned me, I frowned, and she lowered her gaze. These are my terms, Janet. You're moving now. You don't go to him. You don't call him. You don't tell him you're pregnant, and you don't tell anyone you're pregnant until we can hide it. But Mike, I can't do this. What will Nick think? With any happiness, I answered. He will think what I want him to think, what everyone will think. He'll think you've come back to me. But it will kill him, Mike. It will break his heart. Yes, with any luck, I almost grinned. Maybe he'll see how I felt when he took you away from me. Please, Mike, she begged. Don't make me do this. If you really still love me, Then don't force me. If you love me as you say you do and plan to spend your whole life with me, then I don't think it's a big ask, I explained. But it's still your choice. You've changed, Mike, Janet said sadly. You changed me, Janet, I pointed out. Maybe you can change me back. I forced Janet to write Nick a letter with the news that she was leaving him for me and never wanted to see him again. It wasn't as short and impersonal as the messages I'd received, but it was enough. I didn't let her call him to explain anything. I insisted that she never have contact with him again, and if she even saw him on the street, she must leave, otherwise our relationship would end. Let the bastard suffer. By the way, I also told her that her mother was no longer welcome in our home, and she didn't seem to have any problem with that. In a strange way, everything seemed quite reasonable from the very beginning. I made a point of letting Janet know that I wouldn't be testing her, and that I trusted her to honor our agreement, and I think that helped. Of course, I didn't really trust her, but what good would it do to make an issue out of it? About a week later, she told me that Nick had called her at work numerous times, and she had refused to take his calls. In the end, he tricked her into calling her that day, pretending to be someone else. She admitted that she talked to him for a few minutes, but stuck to our story and didn't say anything about the baby. I simply nodded in approval. I hope the bastard suffered as much as I did. Janet moved into the guest room as we had agreed, but other than that we led a normal life like any other normal couple. Everyone assumed that I wanted them to assume that Janet came back to me and I forgave her. Our friends accepted this and, with a few exceptions, seemed happy that we had solved our problems. A little later, Janet sat next to me on the sofa and put my hand on her stomach. "Do you feel how she moves?" she asked, her deep blue eyes shining with happiness. I didn't feel it, but it was perhaps our first intimate moment, and I left my hand there longer than necessary. Later, when we turned on the TV, Janet sat next to me again and pressed herself against me. When I didn't reject her, she snuggled closer, and we spent the next couple of hours cuddling on the couch like a normal, happy couple. When it was time for bed, she took my hand, and we walked up the stairs without a word, past the guest bedroom and into mine, where we helped each other take off our clothes. Barely a hint of a bulge was visible, and Janet looked so healthy and beautiful. We slid into bed and hugged tightly, enjoying the warm closeness of each other's bodies. No, we didn't make love that night, but we spent the whole night in each other's arms. We did not kiss until the morning when I woke up, happy to see my wife back next to me where she belonged. We didn't make love for 2 more nights, but the guest room had been abandoned since then. It had to be, since the baby was coming, and she would need this room at some point. Life was good again, and our problems seemed just a memory. Not distant, even painful, but one that I could live with. Then little Mary was born at 5:35 on a cold January morning, and life seemed better than I had ever dreamed. I even agreed to be in the same room as my mother-in-law, if that room was not in our house. Nick was never mentioned, and if Janet was still thinking about him, I didn't notice. My anxious doubts diminished to the point of almost disappearing, and when we celebrated Mary's first birthday at our house, I even gave in and allowed the dragon to come. I wasn't planning on talking to her much, but, well, you know. Yes, I know, but life was so good, and it was our sweet little Mary who made it all possible. I wish Nick could have been here, I heard the old dragon say to Janet as I returned to the kitchen with the dirty glasses, and at that point I froze. "We don't talk about Nick in this house, Mom," I happily heard my loving wife answer. "Mike would be very upset." "To hell with it, Janet," her mother objected. "He's a Southerner, and you know I never loved him." "Speak more quietly, Mom," Janet warned her. "Okay, Janet, but what did Nick think about the child when he saw how beautiful she was?" "Oh, damn, what did I hear?" The smile disappeared from my face. "It was a bad idea, Mom," Janet continued. "He's just not interested in kids, and it will never work. Anyway, Mike is a wonderful father, and I love him." "But you can't keep dating Nick behind Mike's back, honey," her mother instructed. "You must choose one of them." "I wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't intervened again, Mom," I heard my wife say angrily. You knew what would happen when you lured me into meeting Nick again, and I almost forgot about him. He's not your match, this Mike, honey, her mother continued. If I could. If you could, you would, damned cow, I interrupted, rushing towards them. Janet and I would never have gotten married. Oh God, Mike, Janet screamed. How long have you? Oh God, you heard everything, didn't you? I didn't even give her an answer. I simply took my mother-in-law and roughly escorted her out of the kitchen, through the group of stunned friends and family gathered there, and threw her out the front door for the second time in our lives. Without stopping to check if she was okay, I returned to the living room to confront the crowd that had gathered. Sorry, friends, but the party is over, I announced loudly. I advise you all to get out now and take my cheating wife with you before I do anything I regret. Some took the hint, some stood stunned by the turn of events. I think you should all leave, Janet intervened. Mike and I need some alone time. No damn thing, bitch, I shouted at her. You're the first to leave. The commotion, well, you can imagine it. Several guys grabbed me to hold me down, and one of them tried to hit me. Fred, the big guy, dealt with him and pushed me out of the room before things got worse. I really owe him a lot when I look back. After a while, he brought me back to the living room, where I found Fred and Martha waiting after everyone else had left. Except for Janet, of course, who was sitting in a chair, looking unhappy as ever. Are you happy now, bitch? I shouted at her. Calm down, Mike, Fred said, putting his huge arm around me, both for comfort and to hold me. Give Janet a chance to explain herself, please, Mike, Martha intervened. Perhaps it's not as bad as you think. Not so bad, I exhaled. This is damn worse than bad. He's right, Martha, Janet intervened. I was a fool again, a damn big fool. You're damn right, I shouted at her. What can you say in your defense? I'm just so sorry, Mike, she sobbed. I won't even ask you to forgive me, because I know that you won't forgive me. But Janet, Martha began, but was interrupted. It's no use, Martha. I've failed Mike again, and he knows it. I don't even have the right to ask him to understand. I think you better leave, Janet, I told her angrily. You are no longer welcome here. What about Mary? She begged. She stays here with me, I insisted. But I'm her mother, Mike. We should have thought about this earlier, I pointed out. Where will you take her? Your lover will not accept her, and if you bring her to your bitch mother, I will burn her house to the ground. He's right, Janet, Martha agreed. Let's go to our place for the night, and tomorrow we'll sort everything out. I'm so sorry, Mike, Janet cried, looking at me as Martha and Fred led her out. I dated him a couple of times, that's all, and I swear I didn't sleep with him. Yes, of course you regret it, I spat, slamming the door behind them. If it hadn't been for little Mary, I would have drunk myself into oblivion that night. God, a man can only take so much. But I had responsibilities then, didn't I? Everything has changed. I drank a couple of glasses, but then went to bed, dragging the crib with little Mary into my room, where we slept next to each other. She, of course, did not know about the changes taking place in her young life. But well, the less said the better. Oh God, what's happening to me again? But this time it was different, and if I had to fight tooth and nail, I wouldn't give my Mary up without a fight, and I didn't think I'd have to. As it turned out, I did not get a divorce again, leaving it up to her discretion if she needed it. I filed for legal separation, which was cheaper and much faster. My main reason was to establish custody of little Mary, and when the judge knew all the circumstances and that Janet did not object, he had no problem giving me what I wanted. Hello, Mike. Oh, hi, Carol, I replied as I turned around, unable to stop myself from quickly glancing at the beautiful woman in front of me, especially her beautiful, slender body. How's little Tim? Oh, he's fine this morning, the sweet young mother in front of me replied with a smile. He has already recovered. How's Mary? Gorgeous as always, I replied, smiling, looking at my daughter. Although I'm probably biased. I don't think so, Carol added, sitting down next to me on the bench. But she's so lucky to have a father like you after what her mother did. Heard this before, right? Yes, indeed, this is where we started. So what's next? What happened next? Carol, I must say, was amazing. Okay, she was a few years younger than me, but that didn't mean I couldn't watch. With her luxurious chestnut red hair and almost perfect slim figure, she was everything a man could dream of. But for me, she was too young. 12 years between us seemed too big a difference. Life has been satisfying, but not easy for a single working dad. All I did was work and take care of Mary, but at the time that's all I wanted. However, I discovered the local park and all the lovely young mothers who visited it, and after a few explanations as to why I was there, they all accepted me without question. They were great. Well, most of them, but since I wasn't in search mode, it didn't matter, and I had fun just looking and talking. Okay, I admit that I looked at Carol more than the others. I met her in the park when I was walking with Mary, and she was walking with little Tim. A cheerful little guy, I immediately liked him, he laughed, and I could not hide my smile of pleasure. Carol's husband went to the Middle East for some security work and soon returned in a coffin. The company hadn't completely abandoned her, but their generosity was limited and was about to end. She needed something that wasn't too expensive, and suddenly it occurred to me that I needed a nanny for Mary. Here's the solution. Sorry, it's a Latin term, and I don't know exactly what it means, but as a mathematical engineer for most of my life, I've used it a lot. It seems to mean that the solution was found without much effort. Something obvious. Here it is. Sorry, it's French. So Carol moved in and took care of the two kids while I went to work to earn money. Voila, this seems to be Italian. These things tend to work themselves out, and although I wasn't in a relationship with my girlfriend at the time, we were very happy with each other. Life was good, the kids were happy, and I was happy. I was really starting to forget Janet. Then one evening, I sat on the couch while Carol cleared the table after a delicious dinner. My daughter Mary climbed onto my lap and made herself comfortable, yawning and clearly ready to fall asleep. Tim then decided my lap looked comfortable and came over and climbed onto my lap and promptly fell asleep. Honestly, it was one of those magical moments, and I was almost ready to fall asleep with them. Is there room for me? Carol laughed as she entered the room. Only if we put the kids to bed, I joked, expecting a playful spank from her for my impudence. Well, they're both already asleep, so we can put him to bed, Carol answered, to my surprise, and immediately took Tim into her arms. Taking Mary, I followed her upstairs to the guest room where Carol's two small children were sleeping, and we put them to bed, both giving them a good-night kiss. You don't give me a good-night kiss, Mike. Carol mimicked me when we returned downstairs. She teased me like this often, so I said something equally stupid in response. You don't like me, Mike? Carol asked, looking at me intently. Of course I like you, Carol, I answered carefully. You are very attractive. Do you like men or something? She continued, smiling from ear to ear. Hardly. Do you want me? Of course, Carol, I muttered, realizing that I was in dangerous territory. Any man would want to, but there is an age difference. 12 years old, Carol asked. Is 12 years a problem? Carol, I tried to explain. You're almost young enough to be my daughter. Okay, that wasn't true, and Carol looked at me curiously. So, Carol interrupted the silence, getting up from her chair. If I'm just a child in your eyes, then me taking off my clothes won't bother you, right? I gulped as she began to unbutton her blouse, my attempt to tell her to stop initially failing. Carol, you shouldn't, I finally croaked. Then tell me to stop, Mike, and I promise you I'll never try that stunt again. I'll be too embarrassed. Oh my God, I couldn't speak, so I just nodded, which was enough for her, and soon her blouse was tossed aside, then her skirt. Carol made a small twist, then took off her bra and tossed it aside. My eyes couldn't leave hers, and I couldn't help but notice the effect it had on me. Well, Mike, Carol called me. Stop or go to the end. A sip. Words wouldn't come out, so I just nodded, which seemed to satisfy her, and soon her little panties joined the pile of clothes around her. Leave the heels, she teased, smiling from ear to ear. Come here, dear, I ordered, and a second later she was already on my lap, where her son had just slept, but with a completely different result. 12 years old. No problem, and although she was younger than me, Carol was just as exhausted as I was when the cheerful screams of the children woke us up in the morning. Your turn or mine? Carol asked sleepily, clinging to me. I'll go calm them down this morning if you don't get up, I offered. Okay, love, Carol whispered with a hoarse voice, smiling at me. Your turn this morning and tomorrow mine. Tomorrow, right? And the next day and the next. Life suddenly looked damn good, trust me. In fact, it turned out to be even better than damn good, as Carol and I turned out to be a perfect match for each other. 6 months later, despite my earlier decision to leave Janet's divorce, I filed for divorce myself, and once it was finalized, Carol and I were married. I officially adopted Tim as my son, and Carol, with Janet's blessing, yes, she was still around, adopted Mary. In fact, Janet continued to visit Mary regularly and got along well with Carol. She even started taking both children when she went out with Mary. I made it clear that I wouldn't be happy to see Janet's mother around her, but it turned out that Janet hadn't seen much of her anyway. And Nick, the football player, I never met the guy and didn't really want to. I know that he refused to marry Janet, but as far as I know, he never cheated on her. But there was no doubt that my ex-wife's relationship with her new man was not working out the way she had hoped, and her strained relationship with her parents wasn't helping. I began to feel sorry for her, can you imagine? I think when you love a woman the way I loved Janet, it doesn't go away overnight. The feelings may weaken and eventually disappear, but they are still there and sometimes resurface, often at the most inopportune moments. For me, this moment came about 3 years into my marriage to Carol. Nick was sacked from Stockport, and at his age, he found it difficult to find another decent team. His attempts to get a job as a manager were also unsuccessful. It must have been a tough time for both of them, and Janet needed a shoulder to cry on. I don't know how you can be so kind to me, Mike, after what I did, Janet cried. Everything worked out in the end. But I miss you, Mike, she sobbed. Even though everything has happened, I still miss you. I miss you too, darling, I said for some reason and kissed her forehead for comfort. I don't know how it happened, but that little kiss turned into a kiss on the lips, and before we knew it, all our past passion flared up again. I don't know who started it, and it doesn't matter. What the hell are we doing, Mike? Janet's scream stopped me. We can't do this, Mike, she added, looking at me. This is how I ruined our marriage, Mike. I won't let this happen again. But Janet, I begged, almost losing control. Just this once, darling. Please, just once. No, Mike, no, she screamed, trying to push me away. Think about Carol and the kids, Mike. We can't do that to them, we really can't. Oh Christ, what did I almost do? We both stared at each other, then I slowly stood up. In silence, we got dressed. I'm sorry, Mike, Janet sobbed. I just couldn't let you make the same mistake I did. No need to apologize, Janet, I said, my heart pounding. I shouldn't have taken advantage of you. But you didn't take advantage, Mike, she said. You still have feelings for me, don't you? I nodded in agreement, not wanting to risk words. But you love Carol too, don't you? Yes, I do, Janet, I replied. I'm just confused. I do not know what to do. I know how you feel, Mike. You have to do what I should have done when I found myself in the same situation, Janet said. It may be heartbreaking to love two people at the same time, Mike, but you should choose your wife over me. We hugged again, but this time it was different. We both sought comfort in each other. I better leave now, honey, Janet said finally, and breaking away from my embrace, she collected her things and slowly walked towards the door. Carol will be back soon, she added. Don't tell her anything about it and spoil her tonight. Thank you, Janet, I said sadly. Go back to Nick. He seems to need you. I'll be back, Mike, Janet replied, her voice even sadder. He's a good person, really. He deserves your love, Janet, I said, All my pent-up anger towards him seemed to melt away. "I'm older and wiser now, Mike," Janet said hoarsely, almost in tears again. "I think there's only one man I've ever really loved, and that's not." At this point, Janet burst into tears and rushed out the door, leaving me with this last thought. If only. But then I knew that I loved Carol as much as I once loved Janet. It's a pity for her that my ex-wife didn't realize this a few years ago, and perhaps for the first time I realized the hell she went through during those times. 6 years later, I am still blissfully married to Carol, and we have beautiful children. Yes, Tim and Mary, as well as little Freddie and Linda, are real happiness for us. Janet became godmother to the latter two, both born perfect specimens on the same day 2 years ago. Yes, twins, which delighted Tim and Mary, as they had spent their entire lives telling everyone they were twins, even though they knew it wasn't quite right. And Nick? He finally got a good job at the sports center, where he is said to be very happy and takes good care of Janet. Good luck to him, I say. I don't wish him harm, although we still haven't met, and I don't have much desire to do so. One more note, by the way. 3 years ago, I got a really good promotion, and we had to move to the other side of Manchester. We bought a beautiful 4-bedroom Victorian house in Chapel Heaton, which, as the locals know, is actually, well, I hate to admit it, but, oh my gosh, okay, then it's bloody Stockport. And you know what? This is a really nice, friendly place. I love him. I even take little time to Stockport County matches on Saturdays, unless Arsenal are playing somewhere in the Northwest. But please don't tell anyone. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.